So, ladies and gentlemen, fanboys and girls, nerds, weebs, and otakus, welcome back and welcome home.
Hello there, Apple Bites. This is your Apple Bite Written Writ Ralph talking to you straight from our show here, The Written Writ. Over here we have Jerry, and over here we have The Written Writ Ralph, and we are here to entertain.
Hey, is that what this is that what the Wednesday show is about? We're here to entertain, do a little song and dance for the people.
Today's show is a weird show because happy Valentine's. Well, actually, happy Get Cupid Day, folks.
Is that a thing?
That's what we say here, the Bitten Apple, especially because I'm always trying to get that guy. Sooner or later, we shall get him.
I've been saying all day, Happy Valentine's Day to those who celebrate. You know, just in case. I don't want to offend anybody. You know,
I don't care if offend or not. We're gonna get Cupid. I've always said Cupid needs to be got, and he's gonna get got.
He's gonna get got.
Yeah, I even have a little story where me and my partner here from the show, Cadma, go up and try to get him. I think we do.
Oh, yeah?
Him. I think we do kill him.
All right. Okay.
There you go, folks. He dead. Jerry, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
I was about to start the show and show some stuff off. I was like, well, he'll show up sooner or later.
Do your thing. I love to see whatever you're going to show off. Go for it.
I was trying to figure out ways to show, take some time here to give you time to come in. And one of the things that we have been trying to show off recently is this card game from Hit Point. Let's see. There it goes. Trading card game from Hit Point. Share it over here. They are going to go live in April with their Kickstarter. And they're going to go live in April at the Board Game and Game Expo?
Okay.
I think that's what it's called. It's in the Cradle of Aviation in Long Island. And they are going live with their Kickstarter that weekend that they're there, and they're going to show off their game and their beautiful shiny cards.
Okay.
And if you love D&D and cards, well, these guys are putting something together that looks like D&D and cards.
Were you a big D&D player, or are you still? Do you play?
Oh yeah, I'm been a D&D player. I'm a DM. I love all this stuff. I feel like it actually helped me become the writer I am today by being able to dive into all those things that got the juices flowing. And I've started to use D&D as a way to explain writing, and especially for people who understand the whole concept of D&D and how everything is done. Because when you first start off as a player, you're creating your character to live in this world that DM has created, or that is playing in the bigger soapbox. So, you know, it's you trying to figure out who this character is and how he fits into the story. Great practice for being a writer.
Oh, yeah.
Then as you level up, you become the dungeon master, and then you're playing in a bigger sandbox because you still got to follow all the rules. You got to check out all the books, and you start to create your own world in this structure. And it's a way to learn to create your own world while you're still playing it safe in somebody else's world. And I figure as you level up as a DM, because DM's goal is to create their own stories and have you play those stories. And when you're doing that, now you're playing it, now they're working their ideas and trying to get the players to live in this world they've created. And what better way for a writer to like see all the stuff that he's been creating or she's been creating, and just put it out there. You can actually see it work and see it happen and see these actors play out the stories in this world.
Got it. See, I think that when I was growing up, I never played, and I still haven't. I've actually never played. I've never played D&D in my life, and I often feel like I'm missing out. I think I missed out on a ton of geek stuff when I was a kid because I just wasn't. I don't know. Like, I guess my little friend circle were just not into that kind of stuff. So I just never, no one handed me a comic book. No one handed me. It was much later that I found all those things and found my people. I've never done. So I still haven't played D&D in my life.
That's interesting. So do you think it's just that your circle wasn't doing it? It wasn't that you were like pushed away from that, right?
No. My mom was like my geek thing was TV when I was a kid. I used to watch Star Trek with my mother. That was my jam. The Next Generation was like my foray into sci-fi and all that stuff. And then I worked my way back into the old show, and I watch all the ones on Paramount now. All those all the new shows. But it just wasn't. I don't know. Like the things that she was geeky about, those are the things that I got geeky about when I was a kid. And my friends were like basketball players and stuff. Like they were, the athlete crowd, I guess. Not that I was like I wasn't on the team, but for some reason those were my friends. I don't know, I think they were just like when you're a kid, how like your first friends when you're a kid are just the other people who are around your size who live within a block of your house. Like that's who my friends were. So
the neighborhood kids, yeah. And and when it comes to the neighborhood, this is much I always knew. When it comes to the neighborhood gang of friends, it was more about the fact that you guys are in the vicinity of each other than what you're sharing interests. Because I find that the neighborhood gang of friends usually has so many different interests, and that's not their what bonds them. What bonds them is the neighborhood.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of friends who were into some geeky stuff. I had a friend I remember very distinctly, I was in like the 8th grade and there was a school dance, and this one kid left early because it was on Friday night. And at that time, the X-Files was still on Friday nights. And he left this big party because he needed to go home and watch the X-Files.
That sounds a lot.
I remember everyone else be like making fun of him a little bit. And I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, I'd actually like to go home and watch the X-Files myself.
Oh, definitely. I know I was at certain parties during my youth going, I could be watching TV right now.
Yeah. Those are shitty parties, obviously.
I don't know about shitty, but as who we are, and I'll think you too as well. We are a certain type of thing, and we like a certain type of thing, and maybe sometimes you just weren't in the circle you were supposed to be in, because we do that. We'll jump and we'll go over here, we'll go over there, we'll enjoy it, but it's not our thing.
Right.
At least that's the way it was with me. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my thing. Because you, again, like with you, like you were saying, you were hanging out with a certain group of friends, so that was one of the things they liked, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until I was working on I was working on Comic Book Men, and like I was just in a room full of comic books, and they were all talking about comic books all day, and that's when I first really picked one up and started reading them, and then I was like, oh shit, these are awesome.
Sounds like heaven.
Yeah,
and it's funny because comic books are just a beautiful thing. A lot of people just think they're there for a certain age or something like that, but no, they transcend things. It's another one of those things that connect people, because you can be older, you can be younger. It's just what was it? I remember somebody was calling them the comics is the mythology of America.
Oh wow, that's
You know,
heavy.
yeah, because
I mean, I always feel like they're kind of like anything else, like you can, TV is a medium. You can make TV for adults. You can make TV for kids. You
yeah,
can, comics are the same. You can, I have two very different Kickstarters going right now for different comics. One's all ages and the other is definitely not all ages, you know, so you can kind of, yeah, you can make anything for anybody.
talking about segues. Why don't we segue into that right now?
I wasn't trying to.
No, but it was great. Here we go. We start off with the all ages one. Go for it.
Thank you, sir. This is the Grizzly Crew. It is a story I'm co-writing kind of with my 8-year-old son, who walked into my office one night and just told me kind of out of nowhere, a story about a pirate bear and his gang of pirate bears. There's a longer version of that story, but that's the short version. Yeah, so we're working on this thing together. It's an all ages book, and it's about a group of it's a village, and the village is being attacked by pirates, and the kids are scared at night. And so the parents, in order to kind of soothe their fears, tell them the story about, you don't have to worry about those pirates coming back because we hired the Grizzly Crew. It's this gang of pirate bears who protect the village from the evil pirates are bad, and these pirate bears protect the village. And it's kind of visually, the touchstones were things that I grew up watching, like Robin Hood, the Disney Robin Hood movie, where Robin Hood's a fox, and it sort of looks a lot like Jungle Book.
It definitely does. You can feel it.
Yeah. And then these are covers by Nick Justice, who's the series artist on the thing, and designed all the characters. This one's by Pablo Verdugo. Book colors for both by Nate Lawson. I'm very proud of both of them. And then I have a black and white cover that I really love this cover. This is Len Danovich did this. He's great. Yeah. And he the two main characters, like, you're kind of it's tempting to kind of focus on the little koala bear guy, but these two are have a kind of surrogate brother-sister relationship in the story. And so he's a stowaway. He's a koala bear who thinks he can join the Grizzly Crew, even though he's not really a bear. And he stows away on the ship in order to join. And Rosie here is a black bear. She's 10 years old. So they're both young. Jimmy's like 8, based on my son. And Rosie is based on my daughter. And she's just really smart and kind of ingenious, and finds him on board, and then they become fast friends. They kind of start to rely on each other to deal with all the adults and all the other stuff around. And so it's kind of like, it's all about the things that scare kids and the stories we tell them to make them feel better and help them sleep at night, and how those things can kind of come to life sometimes in weird ways.
Dude, I really do love the fact that your son just broke this whole thing down. And it just came flowing out of him.
Yeah, it was really bonkers. It was the day, it was 2 years ago roughly. It was the day that Mid-Journey came out in a format that people could mess around with it. Mm-hmm. And everyone didn't know that they hated AI art yet. So that first day, I think everyone turned it on and looked at it and played with it a little bit, and then formed opinions. And I was doing that, and he walked in and he said, "Can it make a Spider-Man monkey?" And I said, "Sure, let's see." It did. And then he said, "Can it make a minion wizard?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe it can." And I did, and it did. And then he said, "What about a pirate bear?" And it made a pirate bear that was like this weird deformed looking, it still is, like, the AI art programs are often very bad at making faces, so it made this kind of like deformed, weird looking bear in a pirate hat. And he was just staring at it, and suddenly he was like, he's afraid of bears, like, very, very afraid of bears. So I thought he was having a moment where he was just like freaking himself out about the bear. And then he suddenly was like, his name's Captain Grizzly, and he's the captain of a pirate ship filled with bears, and they travel around looking for treasure, but it's not gold. It looks like gold, but it's honey inside of wax. So you squeeze it and all the honey comes out. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And then I like started writing some of it down and typing some of it out and everything as he was saying it, just kind of taking notes about just the thing he was, just kind of falling out of his head. and he suddenly went, it's called the Grizzly Crew. This was all in like the first 10 seconds of talking about this story. And so here it is. This is 2 years later. Here's the Grizzly Crew.
I love the as a matter of fact thing. It's just flowing completely out of him. He's like, "Oh yeah, by the way," and then I love because we've already we've talked this story a couple times now.
Yeah,
and I just love the idea that you're sitting there with him and you're like, "Wait a minute, but what happens?"
Yeah, I was like, "Wait, who? What?"
Yeah,
yeah. He came up with so many different, like, the polar bear character is named Stefan, and Stefan has a scratch on his face. And then the main villain is Captain Wolfheart, who's a wolf. Is a very scary character, wolf character. And he also has like a claw mark, but his eye is a glass eye. It's like a golden ball. And so these are just design, details that Nick put into the character designs. And when they came back again, my son was looking at the polar bear and the wolf. And when the wolf was colored in for the first time, the colorist decided, to make him an Arctic wolf. So he's white. He's got white fur.
right.
And my son saw the claw mark on his face and the claw mark on the polar bear's face. And he goes, they know each other. And I was like, what? He was like, they hate each other because of before they were pirates, they had a fight. And the polar bear is the one who scratched Captain Wolfheart's eye. And Captain Wolfheart in the fight scratched the polar bear in the face. So that's why they hate each other. And I'm like, who are you, and why are you already better at this than me?
I was gonna say that it's funny, like I was just
you were gonna say that he's better than me? Yes.
No. I just think it's funny that a lot of people who do what we do would sit there and have so much trouble with this, and here comes this kid just going bam, 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 bam. There's people out there going, how the heck does this kid put this together just like that?
What's pretty funny is because of this, my other two kids they're a little jealous that like I'm doing this with my youngest child. I have three kids, I have a boy, a girl, and a boy. So that his two older siblings have started like pitching me comic book ideas, and they're not very good. They're not super good. I'm like, I don't know, buddy. Go back to the drawing board. Maybe rethink all that.
World building is, which is another reason why, like, I mentioned that is world building is not as simple. It's not easy, and it doesn't flow this way. Well, sometimes it does, but it doesn't usually flow the way that it's flowing. The way you're explaining the story. Usually you sit there going, and why is he like this? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he kind of just came up with like the characters. He just thought it'd be cool to have the pirate characters. The whole world around it is still really hard to build. And what's funny now is like, he every couple of days he wants to know, how far along are we? Is there another thing to look? Is there a drawing? Is there another page? Is there like, what part of the story are we up to? In the scripting and the outlining phases. And what's funny is now because we did this together, I have to bring him along for everything. Right. So now that I'm writing the story, like I can't just drive it where I want to drive it. I feel like I'm beholden to him because it came from him. So, I have to sit with him and go, I have to sit with him and go, no, the pirate bear ship can't just be in space now. Like I can't. We've established some rules in our world and we can't just break all of our own rules all the time. Like, and he's like, I don't understand why not. And I'm like, that's a good point. Maybe we can. I don't know.
It's kid logic. It's that beautiful imagination that children have.
Yeah. A buddy of mine used to work on a YouTube series called Written by a Kid. Mm-hmm. It was what was that thing called? It was like, not Freaks and Geeks. It was like Geek and Sundry.
Right.
It was like that YouTube channel. I think it was that. It was on there. And it was hilarious. It was these two guys would interview like a 7-year-old, and he would just tell some random story about a milkman who fights a monster and he dies, and there's the milk gets all spilled everywhere and it goes to a river. And then they would kind of animate it and act it out. And so like, in his episode, he wrote an episode and edited it and directed it. And then he did a lot of the animation for it. And they would have like Joss Whedon is like a character in the story. Like he's like this guy who comes in to fight the monster with guns, and it's just however the kid tells the story, that's what they all have to do. So they're just asking follow-up questions. No one's like guiding the story. It's just the kid is like, here's what happened. And it was like one of the funniest things I'd ever seen at the time. I laughed so hard watching that.
Sounds like the kid version of Drunk History.
That's exactly it. That's a perfect analogy. That's a perfect analogy. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, because when you're drunk, all your stories go like this, and when you're a kid, all your stories go like that.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it was.
Let me ask you this, because you're building this world now, and at the same time you're doing this story. I know some writers don't like to start their stories until they understand the whole world. Then other people will write the story and then work on the world as time goes on. I can see you're able to do both. Which one do you prefer?
I like to write and kind of go back and rewrite. So I'll write, and when I get to somewhere where I need the world to be different, or I need something to be different for the story to kind of make sense. Like I start with the characters, and then I'm trying to like, okay, who are these characters, and what kind of world presents them with enough, like lots of challenges that they'll have to keep overcoming, and it can keep getting bigger and growing, with each issue, episode, listen to me, with each issue, with each passing, with each story arc. And then that means that sometimes I get like a lot of pages into the story, and I've discovered that there's something about the world that now has to exist, and I need to go back and kind of plant those seeds earlier on somewhere, where you change a line of dialogue, or you add a little bit of information early on. So I kind of like to do that. I kind of like to write myself into trouble, and then go back and rewrite myself out of it. Yeah.
I gotta admit, like, you're pretty good, because what most people would do is, and we've seen it with some of our favorite writers sometimes, is that they won't go back, and then you're reading something and you're like, wait a minute, something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it is? I think it comes from the other way you do this is, right, you outline it. You think about the world entirely. You plan the whole thing out before you put pen to paper, or fingers to keys, or whatever. But you outline it to the point where when you write that first scene how the last scene is going to end, right? And then you don't ever have to come back. But I feel like for me, I like to kind of start writing the story, and then it can be daunting. It can be really hard, because if you keep going back, if you don't have enough of a plan or some knowledge of what's happening, you end up just rewriting forever, and you never finish the story. But if you have some sense of like a trajectory, which I usually do, then you can go back and kind of keep laying better groundwork for where the story is going later.
That's actually really important, because and it's funny because I know you probably get it too. We always got people who come up to you and go, "Well, I want to write," and and one of the reasons I created the Written this show specifically is because I read all the books. They go, "How to write," and the whole thing. You sat there after you finished reading the books. You go, there's something missing. There's something that these books aren't talking about. Because they go, "Here's how to write," and then they just walk away, and you're like, okay, what the hell do I do with this? Where do I go with this? What happens next? And it's that journey to become the writer that's missing. They don't really, they kind of mention it, and they kind of like ambiguously mention it. They put it in there. They kind of want you to realize that has to happen in order for you to get to where you got to go. But it's almost like, you'll figure it out, and I'm like, yeah, but shouldn't you like kind of tell them a little bit more that this journey that has to happen for you to become that writer that you'll be later on. And it's not even the fact that you're not a writer now. It's just that for you to get to the end game of who you are as a writer, it won't happen right away.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it all takes practice. It's like anything. It's a craft, and you have to get better at it. There's a lot of, it's harder to, you can't visually represent this online, so it's harder to kind of get it. But artists all the time will show like a time lapse, on Instagram. They'll do like a reel of like, their last like 400 things they drew, and it goes back 10 years to when they were like in their 20s and just starting out.
Mhm.
And you see an evolution there. They get better at their craft as they go, as they do it over and over again. Your 1,000th nose that you drew is going to look a lot more like a nose than than that first one you drew. And writing I think is the same. I think there's like some people kind of get to a place where it feels like they're better at it sooner. Some people take longer. And then it depends on how much you care about it, how much effort you put into it. And but it's a craft, and you practice it. And if you don't practice it, you don't get better at it.
And that's exactly why I started the show, was because I was like, okay, let's me, you and I and you take this journey together to become better writers. Because, again, it's not really there once you read the books. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take you on this journey because I'm taking the journey myself. And then we're going to figure out how this thing works. Yeah. And then at the same time, it's funny because, as soon as somebody comes up to you and they go, okay, Ralph, what's your advice on becoming a writer, or what's your advice on writing? And then I always feel like the asshole, because I go, you write. And then they look at you like you have two heads, and no, you don't understand. You need to write. It's like you were just saying, you need to write, you need to write again, you need to write, you need to keep writing. If you stop writing, you're not improving, you're not moving forward, you're staying stagnant at the position you are at this moment. And I feel like with art, it's so beautiful because you can actually see it, visually see where you've been and where you're going. With writing, it's a little more nuanced because you take it. It's about somebody pulling your writing apart and going, well, this is when he was younger. You can see the this and this, and you start to like it's broken down in a more nuanced way where somebody else has to come in and go, well, if you look at it, you can see that over here he was not that strong with this and this and that and that and that and this. With art, it's like, there it is.
Yeah.
And of course, somebody can come in and go, well, look, if you look over here. But it's just this thing. And I always feel like an asshole because I go, you're right. But it's the truth. You need to keep writing.
There's an interview I just saw. I don't know why it keeps popping up in my feed, but there's like these interviews that Kobe Bryant did for various documentaries where he just talks about how much basketball he played and how it's just a numbers game. Where he's like, how do you become a better basketball player? You practice every day for 3 hours. You play basketball. You every single day. Other people are going to practice for 2 hours, twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You go out there every day, 3 hours a day, and you practice and you get better. And it's a numbers game. Like if you're at the end of a year, if you've practiced every day for 3 hours, you've practiced for like 90,000 hours. How many hours did the other person practice? Who's going to get better faster?
Right.
And that's what it is. It's a craft. You can read books about it. You can look at a demonstration about where your hand is supposed to be if you want to hit a good jump shot. But like you need to teach your arm to do that every time. You need to it's a muscle memory thing. Yeah. And your brain works the same way. You have to teach yourself to think certain ways and kind of pull your own ideas apart and put them back together in ways that make sense. And that's all a skill set that you learn by doing it.
I find that it becomes harder when people belittle the arts. They belittle all the arts because they look at it from the outside and they go, oh, that's easy.
Yeah, it's not work.
I'm like, no, it's difficult. It's difficult to play an instrument. It's difficult to be a musician. It's difficult to be a writer. It's difficult to be an artist. I'm not going to say it's not doable. I'm just saying it is difficult. It's a hard journey to become that person that is actually really good at what they do.
Right.
And again, but it's easier to showcase with music because if as a musician, hey, look, if you listen to him here, he doesn't sound as good as when he was over here.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of writers get disheartened because
well, it's hard. It's like like my brother was a really good artist when he was a kid, and I remember, I remember as a kid, like saying, I'm not a kid, like teenager probably. He used to draw these comic book characters, and he didn't pursue it as a career. He had a lot of really good drawings. He did art in college. He did it all the way through in college, but I think it was more for him like an outlet or a hobby and less of a thing that he wanted to kind of make into a career. So he didn't. And, so like doing something in the arts is hard because it doesn't. It is hard work. It is something you have to practice to get better at. And it's something, like you said, that people don't necessarily look at that way. But if you don't have like a burning desire to do it, then do something else. Like I worked in TV and movies, and one of the first jobs I ever had, this guy Gary, who was a production manager on this movie I was working on, I asked him like that open-ended question, like, do you have any advice, and he was like, well, I mean, it's kind of a silly question in retrospect. When you get older and you look back, it's like, it's a dumb question, because how do you get to be a better writer? You work at it every day. If the question is, how do I get to be like, how do I make money writing? That's a different question.
Oh, it's a whole different question.
And that's like a specific, you can be specific then.
Yeah.
But like otherwise, you got to practice every day, and that's how you get better. But I asked him for advice, and it was like open-ended, how do I make a living at this movie thing? And he was like, don't. His advice was basically like, he goes, listen, I have one question for you. He's like, can you imagine yourself being happy doing anything else? Literally anything else, any normal thing that like your grandmother will understand what your career is. Can you go to law school, or become a mailman or whatever? Like, is there something else that you could do that you'd think to yourself, I could be happy doing that? And if the answer is yes, then you should just go do that, because this is hard and annoying, and it's creative, so it's frustrating, and other people won't get the thing you're trying to be creative about, so they won't relate to it, so they won't help you, or they'll see you as competition. It's weird. It can be catty. Like, all these things are weird. So if you can picture yourself happy doing something that has like a normal, you do this, you get a degree, you get like if you can be a teacher, like you get a degree in teaching, you get a job, like there's a very clear, check these 5 boxes, and now you have that role, you have that job now. He was like, if you can do that, you should just go do that. Don't do this. This is like a lifestyle of annoying shit forever. And I was like, oh, that's very discouraging. Thank you very much. I was like 20. I was like, thanks. Jeez. Okay.
But it's funny because one of the other things somebody would tell you would be like, how do you make money? You work as the crew.
Right.
Yeah, because they make money.
Yeah.
They make money. They're doing what they love. They make money. You work as the crew. As the creative, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's what it is. If you want to work in movies, what do you want to do? You want to be an electrician? We have electricians on set. They're called gaffers. Come on board. You want to build things? You're a grit man. Come on board. Like, you get a job. That's a job. Like, I know what that job is. You can be a costume designer. Like, even that the person who builds the sets, those are just carpenters. Those are those are not like the designers or the art directors. Even art director, that's a job. There's a path. You know how to get there.
Yeah.
I want to write and direct my own movies. I don't know. Yeah. I want to be a comic book writer. Like, there's a million ways you can do that. You can just write a comic, and if you can find on Kickstarter, like, 30 or 40, 50, 80, 100 people that are willing to give you a few bucks for it, then congratulations, you can do that,
So now that we've gone down this journey and this path, this fits perfectly right into that whole thing that we're talking about, because Scott Snyder is helping those people,
right?
To get to where they want to go, or at least try to be there.
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, you were saying about the books behind you about writing. I started taking Scott Snyder's Writing 101 class through his Substack, which he does. It's called Our Best Jacket. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people in the class, and everyone gets to ask questions. And he gets a lot of, I've been in the group now for almost 2 years, I think. And you start to hear the same questions. Like, new people come in, they ask the same questions. And so sometimes he's saying the same thing, a second time. But the advice is sort of the same. Like, you really got to like practice your craft. Mm-hmm. There are tricks, and he imparts like wisdom about things like that. Like, there's a story that appears in the Cloak Room, which is the anthology that you have on screen there. It's in the next issue or two. I think it's in the next issue, not in this issue. But we ask all the creators who submit stories to tell us something from the class that was like inspirational, or that they took away from some class, over the course of the last couple of years. And there was one thing that he said about writing a mystery. And he's like, you can basically, like, whatever the situation, whoever the characters are, whatever the real story is, you can set up a mystery by just having 3 characters in a story, and 2 of them are up to something, and the third person doesn't know what that is. And that's it. It's the most basic, like, setup of, like, here's a really easy way to set up a mystery scenario. And one of our writers wrote, like, a really great, 7 or 8 page short story just that night after Scott said that in the class. So you can kind of take away a little tidbit about, like, those, if you have the desire to actually write, someone giving you some framework of how to think about it is incredibly helpful.
Oh,
and so hearing Scott just talk about the process can be incredibly helpful. You can take away, like, just something about how to think about building a character, how to think about building a world. Do I have to pre-think out the whole story beforehand? Like, he'll talk about his process and how other people are different. It's really great. So the Cloakroom is an anthology series. It was originally a larger book that would come out once a year. They did 2 volumes called Tales from the Cloakroom. Scott Snyder presents Tales from the Cloakroom. It's all short stories created by people who are in Scott's writing workshop and writing class.
Right.
And so they did 2 volumes. Each one of those, I think, had 18 stories. Those were bigger trade paperbacks that they sold, like 120 plus pages. What we did is we took the idea, and each one of those volumes had a different set of publishers and editors. Me and my company, Thorny Comics, we took over we picked up the mantle, and we rebranded it as just the Cloakroom. So Scott Snyder presents the Cloakroom. It's an ongoing anthology series. So every 3 months there'll be a new issue of the Cloakroom with new stories from people in Scott's class. And we'll keep doing that for as long as Scott is happy to let us keep doing it. He's been incredibly supportive, and for as long as he's doing the class and people are in the class and people keep pitching us stories, we will keep publishing this book.
And it's great because, especially with comic script writing, you're right. It's all over the place. There's so many different ways to do it. And I was in one of these groups where, because we're probably in a ton of these groups where they talk comic creation, all this and that. And somebody got upset because somebody had asked a simple question of, can you show me a sample of a script? And they were like, oh, do your own research. And I'm like, dude, sometimes doing that research is overwhelming, especially with script writing, for comic books.
Especially comic writing. Like, I wrote for TV, and like, when you're writing for TV, almost everybody uses the same 1 or 2 programs. You're writing like a manual that different departments have to each, like, pull information out of. A comic script is really just like a way of having a conversation between you and your artist, and you're laying out your ideas. And it can be, this is like, everyone probably listening to this kind of knows this already, but like old school, the DC method, the normal, like, you're writing a screenplay kind of version of writing a comic script. It's detailed. Every panel is like, here's what I want in the panel, and there's a lot of detail. And then there's what Stan Lee used to do, what everyone calls the Marvel method, which is just, he would write a few paragraphs about, here's the story, here's like the scenes, and by the end of it, this is what happens. And kind of the artist would then lay out the whole book, decide how many panels each page had, decide who's talking in what panel, and then Stan would go back and fill in all of the dialogue and the story, and he'd fill in all the kind of the narration and all that.
Sounds simple.
And then there's
really
difficult. And it's like, oh, it's hard. It's all hard. Yeah, of course. Like, you're writing now to somebody else's idea. It's crazy. And so, and then there's those 2 things, and there's everything in between. So a comic script can really be anything. It can be a bunch of paragraphs. It can be very detailed with each panel numbered, and you tell the artist where you want it should be a low angle looking up at a thing. You can be really specific, and everything in between. But that's a good question to just know that, like, that's actually a specific, what does a script look like? That's a specific question that can be answered.
And that's what he wanted to know. And I know that what he was trying to get at was, I know there's a bunch of different script idea or ways to do the script out there, and you guys show me, and I'm like, why are you getting so, like, bitchy here? Just show the kid something, and then he'll see it, and then he'll get an idea, and then he'll move on. But it's funny you said all that, because it goes down to this simple premise that I didn't think about until I was reading Dirk Manning's Right or Wrong, which is his book on writing comics. And
Right.
it's the whole concept of, and when you just said it, the relationship between the writer and the artist. It's
Right.
really important. Well, the relationship with the whole group writing the comic is really important, but the relationship between the writer and the artist is really important for comics, because a lot of people think, oh, you just hire an artist. No, it's not. It's not like that. You don't just hire an artist. You want to make
Right.
sure that the artist works well with you. You want to make sure that this artist works well with your idea. You want to make sure that this artist is able to or capable of putting your idea into these papers through his art style.
Right.
And all that stuff is important. So that relationship between the writer and the artist is huge. And again, it goes back to the script writing too. Your relationship with the artist will dictate how your script is going to go. Because sometimes
Right.
if the artist needs more information, you might need to go DC way. And sometimes you guys have a good relationship and you guys are just tossing ideas at each other and you do it in the Marvel way. And all that stuff in between.
Yeah, and I wrote Cicada Samurai. You had it up on the screen before. Like I page by page was different. I would have pages that I had really specific ideas about what I wanted, and then I had other pages where I would tell Mary, who was the artist, she did an amazing job on that book. I would just say, like, I had one page that just had a paragraph at the top of it that just said, like, there are two characters in this story at this point. They're exploring a world they've never seen before. One of them is about to be brutally murdered. I just want to spend like this page. It's only a 10-page story, so there's not a lot of space to work with. I said, I just want to spend this page seeing the world through their eyes and like falling in love with this character, so that, on the page turn, when he gets torn in half, it's that much more devastating. And that's kind of, I did that, and then I wrote the dialogue, and then she laid out what she laid out, and it's great. But I gave her carte blanche. I just said, that they're maybe they're on a tree stump and they're looking out over a beautiful sunset. Like, it just needs to be picturesque and gorgeous. And they're seeing this whole world for the first time, and then he's going to get ripped in half. And she did this beautiful, gorgeous page based on that.
That's light.
Yeah. And then there are other times where I'm like, there's a rabbit, and the rabbit does this, and then this happens, and then it's very, very specific.
Right.
So, it depends. And I learned pretty quickly that she's really talented and is visually better than me at like thinking about how to, she's an artist, and she's very good at it, And so I would have an idea, and I would there were other parts where I said, I have this idea that this should be 3 panels, but you do whatever you want here, and invariably what she did was better, and it came out really well because of it.
And it's so funny because I know there's always this huge fight in the industry about the writer is better, the artist is better. I'm like, no, it's teamwork. It's a team
it really
effort.
is.
Yeah, and it should just stay there. It's just a team effort. The relationship between the group of people working on this comic make the comic better. Can a toxic group make a good comic? Definitely, but it's gonna be a freaking heartache. And do you want to work in that environment?
Right. Yeah, I had a lot of fun making that. I'm still having fun making Grizzly Crew, and then the other book, the Cloak Room. I'm an editor on this. I haven't submitted a story of my own to publish in the book yet.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah,
I will eventually. Veronica and I have talked about that. She's my co-editor on the project and
I gotta admit, I enjoyed watching the little premiere for this project. It was a lot of fun to hear you guys just talking about the whole thing.
Yeah, we had a really good time. Ming Chen hosted that, and that was a lot of fun. That was great. But Veronica and I talked about, we're both writers in the class, and then this is sort of us exercising a different muscle. We're both editors on this. We're trying to help people write their story to make it the best version of the story they want to tell, not, and the writer in me sometimes wants to go, here's how I would do this. And you can't do that when you're the editor. That's not your job. You have a different role that I enjoy. And it's like a totally different, skill set to have. And I think that we're doing a pretty good job at it. I think that, it's sometimes hard to know where to stop noting something and where to kind of let something live and let it be what it is.
I was going to ask you that right now too, because you know, I understand editors, I understand what they do. There has to be moments where whatever the writer is doing is for the benefit of the story, even though it may be the wrong thing to do. So
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
I just ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always to me like I don't think there are right or wrong answers about
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but I will always, you know, if a character is doing something that seems like is out of character, I try not to come at it by saying something like, you know, this doesn't make sense, because that's like a challenge and people feel the need to defend and argue. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So it's much more like I'll just point out, like when I got to this part of the story, you know, I didn't understand why, like you set up so beautifully early on that this character wants A, B, and C. How
Right.
come in the moment at the end they do X, Y, and Z instead? You know, like what do you think happened there? And then a lot of times they'll just, now you're talking about their story and their character and they just want to talk about it, you know, and
Yeah.
that's the same way I am when I'm writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'll answer questions about why my characters did whatever they did
Mm-hmm.
until I'm blue in the face. I'm happy to do that. And if you found something that is landing on, you know, someone who doesn't know the character the way I do as the writer,
Right. Mm-hmm.
if it's landing on you as wrong, then let's talk about it. And maybe the solution isn't always, you know, you did this part and it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's like, how can we make a small tweak 3 pages earlier that helps make this make sense? Or,
Right.
you know, what little detail can we think about that goes 6 panels before this big thing happens, or whatever it is, that'll make it, you know, feel better. That'll make it, it's that thing where of rewriting, you know what I mean? I'll suggest little things like that. We've been very lucky. Like a lot of the stories we've been pitched that we've kind of engaged with have been in great shape, like just amazing. And even the ones that were close to finished, because we're accepting submissions that are, here's my finished comic.
Right.
And we've given notes on those. You know, we've had a meeting and we'll ask a few questions, and we always leave it up to the creator. Like, I have this idea. You know, here's my story. It's basically done, and we'll talk about. You know, I'll. There's a story in here that there are 2 actually that came to us almost completely finished, and in one of them, the writer had kind of established that there's a narration where you can kind of hear the main character's thoughts, inner thoughts.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that device was very helpful, and then it kind of went away. And so I just asked, like, some of the dialogue here I think might, you know, maybe it's inner monologue, is it all out loud? And he went back and tweaked what was inner and outer monologue, because he was like, oh yeah, well, we did establish that, I can keep using that as a tool. And then, you know, there's another story where there was like one panel at the end that I was like, you know, what is happening here between these characters? And, you know, can there be a more satisfying way to end this, so everybody kind of is on a journey, including the villain? You know, what's the villain want in this story, and how do they get what they want in the end? And it's just a conversation, and through that conversation, the writer, you know, who also was the artist on that one, decided to make a change on it. You know, so it's just collaboration. It's just being a sounding board, asking good questions, and hoping that your questions are constructive, and, you know, not thinking of it in terms of like, if I was writing this story, here's how I would write it, because
Which
that's
is what we do right away. We're like,
right.
yeah.
It's a different, and again, it's a different skill set. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in doing this, I learned that very quickly. I've learned that just through work in general. Like when in television, if I'm working with an editor, on a TV show, I would never sit there and be like, here's how I would cut this. You know, you kind of like give them an idea of what you're thinking.
This is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, like I want it to feel a certain way. This should
Right.
be funnier. This should be more broadly comedic. This should be less funny. This should be more serious. You know, and then how they interpret that with music and stuff. Again, that's their skill set. That's their storytelling ability, and they'll do it.
It's funny that you said that, because I've been an editor, and every once in a while somebody will come and you know, they'll say something to me, and this and I go, okay, how about this? You know, and we do this and this and this and this, and it'll make it so it looks like that. I'm like, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
So then you do it their way, and then they come back, this is crap. I'm like, yeah, you told me to do it this way, and here it is. That's not what I told you.
So funny. I've seen producers in an edit bay with editors, and they'll start snapping at them, like, no, and then hold on, cut like that. And I'm like, why are you snapping at this person? Like, just use your words. Just say the thing that you're trying to say.
You know, it's the power. I've got the power.
Exactly.
But I'm happy that you said all that, because I feel like sometimes, especially as writers, and we'll give it to people to read, and the worst thing that ever happens when you give it to somebody to read, and you go, "So what did you think?" And they go, "It was good."
Yeah.
Dude, give me something here, man. I appreciate the fact that you said it was good. Why was it good? What connected you to the story? And I feel, and I always talk to friends all the time and going, dude, if you're gonna like read somebody's stuff, at least know that what they're looking for isn't your praise and your approval.
Right.
It's what did you think about it? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Because all that helps out.
Yeah, I'm in like a couple of Discord groups with these creators who, all have Kickstarter campaigns going and comics up online, and it's great. They're like super supportive and helpful, and there's a couple of them that have a specific channel on Discord where it's like, hey, I have a script, I'd like some feedback, and they'll just post some of their scripts, and then you can any other one of us in the group can kind of go in and offer to be a sounding board and kind of talk through whatever it is that we saw that struck us as great or confusing, or whatever the case may be. I find that very helpful, and I think that being that sounding board without being like, here's how I'd write this, or and then sometimes it's about knowing when to do that. Like sometimes it's like, if you're talking to someone and you've asked them questions and it's kind of shaken the whole kind of foundation of the thing they thought they were writing, and now even they don't know, how does this end? What is the satisfying ending here? Sometimes I do the same thing where I'm open to pitch me an idea, and I'll try to see how that works in my writing.
I've been there before, where you finish writing something, you're sitting there going, no. and you don't know what's wrong, you don't know how to fix it, you don't know what's going on,
right?
You just don't know, and everybody
gets too close to it.
Everybody goes, why don't you know? Like, I don't know, this is what I wanted to write, but at the same time it's not what I wanted to write. So and how do you convey that to somebody?
That happens a lot in TV when you're doing comedy, because if I go out and I shoot a bunch of scenes in a show, and then I think it's going to be funny, and then the editor cuts it, and then whatever the editor does makes it even funnier. The first time I watch it, I'll laugh. I'm laughing out loud. I'm surprised. The jokes are hitting me, catching me off guard, and making me laugh. And then, you watch it 50 more times, because that's your job. And then you send it to someone, and then someone else gives it notes, and then you have to watch it again. And then by the time you get through all the feedback and all the notes and everything, you're watching that same scene again, and you don't know if it's funny anymore. And then you start to think, maybe I should change it, even though this is the thing that made me laugh so hard the first time. It's not making me laugh now. Maybe it's not as funny as I thought it was. Maybe we should start messing with it. And then you can kind of end up in the weeds of just kind of messing with a good thing. You have a good thing going and kind of overthinking it.
I feel like this is all led to something that I've been, we talk about this a lot, especially how things are going recently when it comes to like movies and reading and the whole thing, the whole creative process. We've gotten to this point now where I think the fanboy has taken ownership of these things that aren't really theirs, but because it's their fandom, and they're like, well, this is my thing. You should do it the way I want you to do it. And, as a writer, I'm usually an asshole. I'm like, I'm not writing for you. And I don't write for the audience, and, it's gotten people have gotten angry at me before. And I'm like, well, there's something I'm trying to do. If you give me like some kind of good, good feedback, I might go, okay, I think I can fix this, or I might move in another direction. There's times where you're sitting there going, no, this is exactly what I wanted to do.
Right.
And that's a big question for writers too, is like, who are you writing for? Are you writing for you? Are you
and you can, and the thing is, you can do both. You can do one or the other. You can, if you write the thing that you this is something Scott always says. I think it's Scott, but I've heard it before. I've heard versions of it before.
Mm-hmm.
You know who John Cameron Mitchell is?
Yeah.
He was Hedwig, right? So I remember an old interview with him I saw where he was basically like, take two things you love that don't make sense together and jam them together. And that's how Hedwig and the Angry Inch became a thing. Like, he's like, I loved like androgynous 70s rock, glam rock. And I loved like weird stories about, weird characters. And I just kind of took those things and jammed them together. And now I have Hedwig and the Angry Inch. It's a rock and roll kind of musical, and like Scott says something about, if there's a story that you wish you could read and you don't see it on the shelf, write that story. That's your story to write. Like, you do it.
Because if you want to see it, you might as well make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen. And then you're writing for yourself. You're writing something that you like, that you would like to read. And there's a good chance that you'll do a better job at it because it's something you care about. And then you'll find other people who also would like to read a similar story. And you can kind of build an audience that way. You can also just decide, like, look, there's a crowd out there that really likes this kind of story. I'm going to write that kind of story. It's a different decision. And some people are very good at that. Some people, like a lot of people go to work at a DC Comics or a Marvel Comics to kind of make a name for themselves, and they're not necessarily going to write superhero books. Those aren't really necessarily the stories that they want to tell or be remembered for, as a writer. But you do that to build an audience and to please them, and it's a different skill set. You're writing something that kind of you're playing in someone else's sandbox, and that's another skill set. Writing a good story with those barriers and those rules is a skill set that's good to develop. And then you kind of know, what it's like to do that before you go and you write without those barriers, and you can write whatever you want.
And which brings us completely full circle to how we started this whole thing. And it's funny that you say that, because I find that, what ends up happening, especially with DC and Marvel, is that you get these writers who go into one of these projects and they're like, well, I really don't like Batman, so I'm going to write him this way. And I'm like, why are you writing Batman?
Yeah.
I'm like, if you don't like the character, that means you're pretty much doing a character assassination,
right?
Because you're going to go into this because you don't like the character, so you're going to show people why you don't like the character. And I'm like, don't do it.
Right.
But, it bugs me out, like, and then I'll always come back to Star Wars because these sequels, were made from people going, well, I don't like what they've done, so I'm gonna take that, throw it out the window, step on it, take a shit on it.
See, what's funny is there are two different people that you could be talking about right now, and I need to know which one which sequel do you feel like threw out what they didn't like from before?
Well, it definitely, it's the middle sequel. What the Last Jedi? Definitely.
I have a very controversial opinion about those movies. That's my favorite of those three movies.
I can see why, because it does take the story in a whole different direction. There's merit to it. But the problem is that you're not really dealing with your world; you're dealing with somebody else's world.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what he did in that movie, it's Rian Johnson. I think a lot of what he did in that movie is just kind of expanding on things we already knew a little bit. And then he took a lot of risks, and I think some of them
he definitely took a lot of risks.
and some of them like didn't work. I think like the whole plot of them going to that casino planet kind of ended up being like, why did they have to do any of that stuff? They didn't really have to do any of that stuff. There were things like that, but there are things in it that I love, like establishing the idea that you can pass a physical object through the Force. That blew my mind, and I was like, that's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, that
was awesome. And there were lots of things like that. It just democratized the Force too, because the prequels, there were Jedi from everywhere, and then in the original three movies, it's like you basically had to be part of the Skywalker bloodline to have any connection to the Force. All the other ones were dead. It was I think I enjoyed that moment where Kylo Ren looks at Rey and just goes, "You're nobody. Your parents were nobody. You're not part of this story. It has nothing to do with you. You don't belong here. You're not important." That turned my stomach in like the best possible way, because the whole time you're waiting to find out this is Han Solo's illegitimate daughter from some
or
other
something like
thing,
that.
or
Yeah.
or it's like Luke's niece or some other thing, like some other, you know, and there were all hints about that, like in the previous movie, and he
Yeah.
just kind of was like, no, she has the Force because anyone, like it has to rise from somebody, it has to rise up, and it doesn't need to be a Skywalker bloodline character to do it. And I love that. I love that about that movie.
I think that's a great concept and it's a great idea, but I feel like, again, it was an assassination of character, because instead of just putting that out there, what they did, and it's not even just him, it's all three of the sequel movies. It is, okay, we know you love this stuff, but we're going to step and shit on it, and we're not going to get any reverence to it because we don't think it's important anymore.
Yeah, see, I didn't feel that way. I kind of felt like the third movie, if anything, was I think the two that JJ did, I think, were too reverent, if anything. Like that first, the Force Awakens was very closely plotted to like the original movie, and there's literally a map inside of a droid. Everyone's looking for it because they're trying to win, some kind of like,
oh, definitely
win the war. It's the same. It's very similar, And then the last movie, when he tried to retcon everything Rian Johnson did.
Yeah, fix it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I didn't think it needed to be fixed. I think like there are parts of that story that that I don't think landed, and I think there were a lot of parts of it that I really, really liked, and I think he could have just gone with it. But like going back over that moment again when he's like, "You're nobody," that to me was the best part of all three of those movies. And then the third movie just is like, nah, it was bullshit. He was lying or something. She's actually somebody. She's like the daughter of the most important villain in the history of all these characters. And I was like, come on, guys.
That kind of, you sat there. I have to admit, you're sitting there going, what?
Yeah, like every part of that was like, no, what really happened was this.
Like, please just see. But here's the thing. Here's what I'm saying. Because I do like all these aspects that you're bringing out. My problem is, we're walking into this movie. You have this legacy that you're doing. So even the first movie of the sequel kind of gets it wrong, because what the fans and what the story is indicating is you want these three guys to be together one last time. You want them, you want a reverence to be paid to the past before you move on to the future. And even in that first movie, it's like we don't give a shit about your Skywalker and your Leia and your Han Solo. We don't give a shit. We're going to show you how much we don't care. We're going to kill Han Solo off in the first movie. And they're not even going to get together, all three together in one scene.
I agree with you there. I feel like they should have. There should have been some way to get those three in the room together, even if you kill Han in the movie.
Exactly, like, you can still do it.
You just have to get it and then have that feeling, and then that's a great storytelling turn,
exactly,
where that's it. Like it's over. You got it. You got your moment.
Yeah.
And it can never happen again. Now
that's that flow. That's that flow of the journey of those.
No, I agree. I agree.
The hero's journey. Because what you're doing is like, okay, so this is the status quo,
right?
And we're showing you the status quo, which is what they should have done with that first movie. Here's the status quo. We're showing you what the status quo, and then if you kill Solo, you go, fuck, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So now you've given the story its reverence. You've given the people the thing. Now you can do whatever you want for the next two movies because it really doesn't matter.
Right.
But that's just the storyteller going.
I agree with that. I agree with that. It needed to be like the last ride.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. But the middle movie, I just liked that it was like, I didn't find it irreverent. I found it like, I like that kid at the end who like makes the broom move right before the credits roll.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I fucking love this. I just love that it could be anybody. Anybody can be the savior. Anybody, someone, the Force has to rise in somebody, and they have to help.
And that's great.
I really like that.
It's funny because the world itself is set up that way.
Right.
I feel like the Skywalker story, is the Skywalker story, but they're important for whatever other reason.
Right.
Once you look at the universe itself. I've always been upset that they kind of kept it to the Skywalkers. I feel like other people survived. Other people survived. Other people got to and that's how they're telling the story now. oh yeah, so and so survived when they tried to kill him because it makes more sense. It
Right.
doesn't make sense that everybody get killed off. But that's more again, that's the flow of the story. And I feel like that's what they've been trying to fix now is this whole idea that, well, these are the last Jedis. No. There's other ones of them. I'm waiting for Mace to show up somewhere, man, because Mace did not die.
Look, man, Nick Fury always pulls through, right?
Exactly.
Nick Fury always shows up in Act 3. He the helicopter lands or whatever, and he walks off, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, he made it!"
We don't know how he made it, but
yeah, every time, like.
But it's so funny because Star Wars is famous for that stuff because they'll take a character and it blows up and then they kill the character.
Yeah,
you're like, why did we kill the character off? I don't know.
Right.
Because Lucas did that shit a couple times, like Boba Fett. Cool character, he puts him in. We're gonna kill him off in a very nonchalant way. He's dead. He got eaten.
I had a friend who had a very funny theory that this is when everybody was angry at the prequels, like really just like, oh, why? What is he doing?
Yeah, a whole different thing for the prequels now.
Yeah. We don't have to get into that. It's another. I don't have enough time in my life to relive all that, to relive all those arguments from like 25 years ago. But he had a really funny theory that basically was that George Lucas hates Star Wars.
Wow.
And so he was like all the things that were cool about it, like that, the Force, this mysterious magical force that like, flows in and out of all living things. He kind of made it like the Metachlorians and was like, you can measure it and they can do a blood test and see if you have the Force. And it kind of like all that. It just, Darth Vader is like the most amazing, like the best villain in cinema history. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to see him as a little boy who loves his mommy and he like loses his mommy. And isn't that fun? And you're like, no, I kind of liked him because he's awesome and evil and, and like, and so his theory was like he just got tired of answering questions about Star Wars, and he just decided I'm going to try and ruin it by making these movies. It was just a really funny
narrative because that would make sense why he sold it off.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be really funny if he was trying to ruin it and he accidentally turned it into a $50 billion franchise and then sold it to Disney.
Because it's so funny because when you hear the interviews in the beginning, he goes, "Oh, I have these three movies planned out." Then as time has progressed, he goes, "Oh, I never had them planned out."
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things. It's different, it's like it's very different depending on when you talk to him. And he also had like I read somewhere, I don't know if this is something he even ever said, but basically like in the first movie. He wasn't sure he'd ever get Harrison Ford or Carrie Fisher to do another movie. He wasn't sure that, he wasn't sure. Like they didn't know it was going to be a success. They had no idea. Mm-hmm. They had some idea probably, but they didn't know, So he had like a backup character ready to go to step into every role. So literally like Luke and Leia are twins and either one of them could be the one. Based on like what in the first movie and what you find out later, looking back at the first movie again, it really could be either one of them. We don't know which one is going to be.
It's funny that you say that. That's why when people got upset that Leia was using the Force in that movie, I was like, no, it makes complete sense. Of course, she's probably been training. They haven't shown it, but she's probably been training.
And there's a bunch of those books where in the canon, like she goes through Jedi training.
Exactly.
A whole series of those books. But there's like a backup. There's a backup savior. There's a backup Han Solo. That's what Lando Calrissian is. There's a backup like roguish, character to just step in, just in case Harrison Ford was never coming back for whatever reason. They had like a backup plan.
Character off from early on.
Yeah. So how much of a plan did he have if he had like backup plans just in case actors didn't want to come back? It's like, but I don't know if any of that's real because again, if it's been 50 how many years since the first movie? 48 years.
40 something years. It should be almost
77,
right?
Yeah,
77. So about 47 years.
44. Yeah,
40, a little more.
47.
There you go.
47 years. So, the story changes.
See, that's the funny thing about being the creator, being the writer, like we've just been talking about. When somebody asks me about something I've written, and they'll wax poetically about it, I'm like, whoa.
Right.
They go, what? You didn't think about that when you were writing it? No.
Right.
There's times where I'm actually thinking deeply about something I've written, but there's times where I'm just writing what I'm writing.
Right.
It goes back to this like example I like to use is like oh my God, I understand that you made the curtain blue because blue signifies this and this and this and this, and I'm like, interesting. Is that what you did it? No, blue is my favorite color.
Right. Yeah. In your head, you're like, I wish I know why the artist decided to paint to make that curtain blue. I hope it's as well thought out as you think it is.
It never is. Sometimes it's like covering up a mistake.
Right.
Oh, but dude, we really geeked out today. So tell the folks where they can find your stuff again, because I can see we're at the top of the mark. Can you believe it's been an hour? Shit.
It's been just over, man. We're at what are we at here? Yeah,
111.
All my comic stuff is at Thorny Comics. Thorny Comics. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, mostly Instagram and Facebook. Those are my two go-tos for right now. And you can find the Cloak Room, the anthology that I'm publishing and editing, is currently on Kickstarter. It's already about 2/3 of the way to its goal. We're just about 26 hours into the campaign, so I'm feeling really good about that one. And my other campaign is the Grizzly Crew, which is an all-ages story that's also on Kickstarter right now. Only has 13 days left, and we still have about $800 or $900 that I need to raise. I'm feeling less confident about the Grizzly Crew. Just the all-ages stuff just doesn't really. It doesn't perform automatically as well as other stuff does.
I have to agree with you, but at the same time, there's something weird happening recently with Kickstarters. Yeah, I was actually talking with behind the scenes with Matto about this, where there's books that you're like, this should have funded already. It should have funded ages ago. Why is it still having trouble? Or books fund and then they don't move from there. Right. And you're like, what? So I feel like they're you see a lot of Kickstarters. Do you feel like something's going on? Because I know this is the same thing we were discussing with what happened with Rich's book. It should have been a definite buy, and then
I think it's the people who are into comics and on Kickstarter. I don't think it's a ton of people. And I think I know statistically, I don't think there are more Kickstarter campaigns live right now than any other time. Like, I don't think it's like there's suddenly more competition, but I do think that the people who are doing Kickstarters have all gotten a lot smarter and a lot better at it. Like, there are kind of rules that almost everybody knows. Like, there's tons of people who've gone through, I can never remember his last name, but Tyler, the Comics Launch, the Comics Tribe.
Okay, yeah.
Those guys like that. He has a whole podcast series that's just nothing but talking about how to make a successful Kickstarter. And there's a whole bunch of other, things you can do if you join his group and you have like meetings with him to talk about how to do this. So I think there are just rules that everybody kind of knows to follow. So it's harder to stand out, because like this image I have here, I think that's an awesome cover image. But if you look through Kickstarter right now, there's like 25 other comic books that also have awesome, an awesome image to show off their book. And like a year or two ago, this might have stood out more, and I don't think it does necessarily, because more and more people have kind of learned how to do Kickstarter campaigns, make them look good. Yeah. So I don't know if there's something going on with it or what. What's that?
That's a good theory right there, because I didn't put that into account. People have gotten better at their Kickstarters, so now the competition is more fierce.
Yeah, the competition is everyone kind of is doing a good job. So if you don't have, it's also, I did Cicada Samurai, which is like an anime kind of looking violent book about the fears of being a parent and like people getting killed and stuff. It's kind of bloody. I did Reign of Dracula, which is not like a for kids story. That's another thing that my publishing company, published. The Cloak Room is kind of all over the map, in terms of, and then Billy the Kid. These are all the things that I'm sort of have been involved with on Kickstarter in various ways. and this is a kid's book. This is an all ages story.
Yeah.
So it's just not the same genre. It's not the same kind of people who are there for Reign of Dracula and love gothic like evil and those kinds of darker stories and stuff. They're not necessarily looking for like a thing that could be a Saturday morning
I
cartoon.
see your point. I see your point. It's off. It's a little off brand, is what you're trying to say.
It's a curveball, you know, and I haven't really settled into a niche of
Mhm.
like, here's the kind of stories I tell, because I like telling all different ones.
See,
So
that's what we
there-
like you though, is because you're all over the place, just like the Bitten Apple is. Because I'm constantly being told, Ralph, if you concentrate on this, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not concentrating on this. I want to discuss all the stuff I want to discuss.
I am planning after this to not. I'm not going to do a new IP for a while. I'm gonna try and personally write and bounce back and forth between the Cicada Samurai and the Grizzly Crew and kind of build both of those. I want to tell that at least that first 5 or 6 issue, that first arc, and then I'll decide where I want to go from there. Once I feel like it's
That's a great idea.
finished, I won't come back. But I want to focus and build on it.
I know the audience sometimes goes, okay, where is he going with this?
Yeah.
Why is this new IPs?
Right. So if I end up with 100 backers on this or something close to it, and I meet my goal, I want to write another one for those people so they come back.
Yeah, that's a definite. And like I said, this thing looks like it should be an animation. It should be Saturday morning cartoon. So I want to see that too.
Yeah.
And I want to see what else your son comes up with.
Yeah, he's fierce. There'll be something. I don't know what the next one is, but there'll be something for sure.
Of course, our friend was here the other day ago, and crossover division, great story idea. I like what he's doing. Oh, we're not.
Yeah, I think that was me. I backed it right before the show.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I love. It's funny because yours did the same thing before I showed it. It was like boop boop.
Yeah.
So crossover division, great idea. I love the whole crossover idea with the different old story ideas coming together, coming into the now. You guys should really go check this out. This is actually one of those books that you're sitting there going, why isn't this funded yet? And he got 8 days to go, but he's really close.
He's very close. Yeah, a few $100.
Come on, folks. We can get him. We can get him higher.
He'll definitely get there. He will definitely get there with this. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so funny because now it feels like it's always like drama to get funded. Then if you're lucky, you'll eke over.
Well, that's always a game too. Like, what number should you pick? Are you really going to set a goal that is exactly how much it costs you to make the book, or are people going for profit, or are they accepting a lower number? I've never set my goal at the actual break-even point. I've always been low.
Yeah, which is what most people do now. Because it's easier to try to make up the money than it is to try to make up the campaign.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm definitely like, what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to set a goal that is, I think, achievable, that I feel comfortable that is achievable without like having to sweat too much. And that helps me recoup some of what I put into it, but lets me kind of, run from there.
Another book that's doing the stuck. They're a little higher now because they were stuck at 900 something. Now they're at 1,000 something. And it's funny because we're looking at these going, oh, like before we would look at this and go, oh, 7 days left, and no more. It's gonna get to where it's gonna go, But now you're sitting there going, and his pledge goal is actually pretty low. It's 3,500. Folks, come on, help this guy out. It's a great story. Love the sci-fi aspect of it. Love the Cuba addition to it. If you're looking for great stories, Kickstarter is the place to be. Speaking of great stories, here's Dirk Manning's Homestead, a Native American Western werewolf graphic novel. He's already at 128 followers. I'm not too worried about Dirk. He does well with the Kickstarters. Yeah. He's an amazing storyteller. His books do very well. Doesn't mean not to support him. It means, go help him out. Of course, Write Wars is the game about writing. And if you guys have been watching us and listening to us on the whole concept of creating and writing, here's a place where you can actually get that practice in writing. The game is, a bunch of writers are in a room. They're all putting up what they think is the best phrase for the story, and then they vote on the best phrase, and that phrase moves over and makes the story bigger. This thing is, I think, going live on February 20th. I'm going to try to see if I can get the guys on next Wednesday for the 21st. Right? Yeah.
Next Wednesday is the 21st. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, Right Wars, go check it out. Like I always like to say, sign up to get notified. It really does help the project. And of course, like we were talking at the beginning of the show, here is Hit Point. If you love D&D, if you love card games, this is where to go. And they actually took their whole system and changed it completely from what it was in the beginning, because of that whole thing that happened with Wizard of the Coast, and everybody got a little scared about the 5e and the whole contracting issue. So their whole thing is now different than the D&D stuff. So check them out. And of course, this is the moment where I would talk to the rest of the guys, but nobody's here. But I think we covered everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've had a great show. We have had a great conversation. And if you love all that thing about writing and creating all this stuff, this is the show to go back on and listen to a bunch of the stuff we've talked about. Jerry has a good mind, and he's a great creator. And it was great picking at your brain.
Thank you, sir. I had a really great time, as usual, hanging out and geeking out. And I look forward to doing it again.
I know it's a great conversation when you go, damn, it's already an hour later. So, folks, we'll do what we always do here at The Written Writ. I'll press the button, and where it stops, nobody knows.